If someone is rude to me, should I be rude back? What is he doing? An ode to rudeness. And when I respond at the same level, what am I doing? An ode to rudeness. I don't fight it, I reinforce it. So, if I'm treated with rudeness, I become more diplomatic, more humane, with a greater ability to use words intelligently. I truly combat not that person, but the behavior that enslaves them. Through my example, perhaps they can even recycle and overcome it. Hello. We are here today, then, for the 5th and 6th books of Emperor Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I hope you remember that recommendation we talked about one of these last times, that reading truly begins when we close the book. When you close the video, when you close the book, that's when your reflections begin. Here are mine. Behind this are the reflections of Marcus Aurelius. It's necessary for you to know your own. We have to pass this knowledge on to the future. Not passing it on exactly as we received it, but adding more than just the reflection of our own lives. For others, for ourselves, it's necessary to deepen knowledge, reflect on it, live it, make it your own. So, I hope this beautiful book is being a good journey of reflections for you. Shall we get started then? The 5th book, first paragraph. Turn to this reflection when it's difficult for you to wake up in the morning. I rise to perform a man's task. Why insist? I will do what I was born to do, what I was sent into the world for. Throughout the entire book, you will notice the underlying thought of Marcus Aurelius, which is very clear. An ordered universe, according to laws, and endowed with purpose. Like a great machine, a vast mechanism where each piece is essential. Each one, being what it is, plays an important role within the whole. And each one, when it fails to fulfill what it is, can cause great harm to the whole. Imagine what an airplane is, a marvelous, complex machine. It's something that past generations wouldn't even dare to dream of. A man flying in a machine heavier than air, full of complex gears, but that little wheel of the landing gear. Because it's such a simple thing. It can jeopardize the entire machine, all the lives that are there. So, each gear within the universe plays a fundamental role in the proper functioning of everything. And each being fulfills itself by being what it is. We act in the world to be human in an increasingly complete way. And nothing should be as delightful, as pleasant, as appealing, and as fulfilling and joyful as getting out of bed, to be a little more human than I was before, to add value to my life and to the lives of those around me. So, Marcus Aurelius works with this concept all the time. Don't postpone the moment to be human. Be motivated by it. Look at the greatness of the human condition. See how wonderful it is. You are being invited to consciously participate of the human species to add your value to the value of humanity as a whole, helping humanity take one more step towards completeness. Don't delay this. This is fundamental. Still in the first paragraph, he will say, don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants, the spiders, each performing their unique task and contributing in their own way to the order of the world? It's that you don't love yourself otherwise. You would also love your nature and its purposes. Isn't that beautiful? In other words, everything doing with full enthusiasm what corresponds to it, fulfilling its role in the whole. I often say in my lectures that when nature needs a plant, the plant says present and performs photosynthesis, which is the foundation of the food chain, exchanging gases with the environment. When nature needs an animal, the animal says present. And they exercise the instinct of survival, the instinct of perpetuating the species. When nature needs a man to exercise what is human, that is, a life grounded in values, virtues, wisdom. Many times, the answer is a great silence. Perhaps men do not love much yet. The human condition, they don't even know it. Otherwise, they would be more excited, more motivated to fulfill it, which is a great privilege. Let us not fall into that old story that Eastern tradition presents, which is the theory of impact, of only valuing things when we are about to lose them. Let us learn to value the gift, which is a human life, starting with our own, but not limited to it, of course, so as not to fall into selfishness. There are men who, given over to passion, Socratic to drink, to sleep, and to what excites them, the useful actions of society seem less valuable and worthy to you. Of zeal. In other words, to be. It is worth less than existing that you enter the realm of being when, by your works, I will know you. Using there, a part of the biblical proverb. When you look and see that what you did added human value to the world. Look at the trace of someone and say, a human being passed through here. You have entered the realm of being. The other things that seem so pleasant to us are merely in the sphere of existing, of surviving. And not precisely of human living, because we lack excitement for what is more refined, more noble, more elevated. Probably because we don't know it well, we haven't refined our taste, and there's no way to value those things we haven't properly savored. We must pause to appreciate the taste of a generous action, of an empathetic action, refine our palate and learn to enjoy that flavor. And realize that there is no greater satisfaction than this. As a philosopher I greatly admire from the last century, Sri Ram, once said, evolution is nothing more than the refinement of taste. Stop liking only what is tied to survival and start appreciating what characterizes human life. Whoever performs a good deed does not, the public, before doing another, what the vineyard. That will bear fruit again when the right season arrives. Notice that a good deed, a truly good deed, is self-sufficient. It is its own greatest reward. It brings the satisfaction you need just by Socratic. If we need something else to justify, to value the praise of others, the recognition of others, that is not truly an action seeking the good. Goodness is just a means, not an end in itself. Goodness, when it is an end in itself, carries its own gratification within. And you do it for what it is. You act when the law of necessity expects it from you. Just as nature knows exactly when to bloom, it knows exactly when to bear fruit. We also need to know when it's time to plant, when it's time to bloom, and when it's time to bear fruit. Why? Because plants are plants and humans are humans. And we have our duties. However, the human spring is not something marked on a calendar. Rather, it is a time of human consciousness. But it also has a cycle. There comes a time when we must bloom and bear fruit. As it is said nowadays, Aesculapius prescribed horseback riding, cold baths, and walking barefoot. From Virtia to say, the nature of the whole prescribed you an illness, a mutilation, the loss of parents, and other similar trials. Let me explain to you Aesculapius, Asclepius, the god of medicine, who is greatly inspired by Serapis, the Egyptian. This being he was like the patron of doctors. So, when Aesculapius is saying here, it's as if one of Aesculapius' priests, in other words, a doctor, prescribes for your illness, so that you may have a physical cure. Ride a horse, take cold baths, walk barefoot. For what purpose? So that your physical health is preserved or restored. It seems there is another level of medicine, another level of remedies, which are those that preserve the health of your soul, and sometimes they come as bitter medicines. In other words, life, at a certain moment, wanting you to grow as a human being, wanting you to achieve a certain virtue that you came here to conquer. Wanting you to harvest the fruit you came here to gather, life will sometimes give you bitter syrups, some trials. This reminds me a lot. Khalil Gibran, the prophet, when he speaks of pain, he says, "The doctor within you make the bitter medicine for the patient within you. In other words, the bitterness of the medicine is a necessity to reach the desired health. So, the nature of the whole sometimes prescribes us pains, and through them, through these difficulties, we reach the level that our consciousness demands of us at that moment, that life expects from us at that moment, like a staircase. We are walking horizontally, and if we let it, we will walk horizontally forever. Life places a wall in front of us and demands that we look up, overcome it, and move to another level. And only in this way do you move from one level to another, much higher. Notice how interesting it is, life. There is an entire therapy designed to help human beings grow. And sometimes it's not a sweet medicine. Thus, let us accept what Aesculapius prescribes for us. Although there is much bitterness in its prescriptions, we endure it in the hope of health. So, accept whatever comes, even if it seems too burdensome, thinking that you contribute to the health of the world. For the successful and happy execution of Jupiter's designs, realize that our bitter medicines are sometimes, and especially, for this purpose. So that we bump into a wall that prevents us from moving forward with so much selfishness. May our future plans, our dreams, not only involve personal achievements, but a bit more. Spacious, let's say, a bit more expansive. Family, a bit more. Friends, a bit more. The community where you live, a bit more. Humanity, a bit more. All beings, above and below us. The beings of nature, the divine beings, and all life in the universe. May we have considerations, may we take actions that neither disregard nor devalue anything of worth in the world. There is an Eastern prayer. As it says, expand your vision until your dreams are the same as God's dreams. That's beautiful and fits so well here. I find this very beautiful because when you look here, there, and everywhere, you notice so many voices from the past, the present, in so many places around the world, all saying the same thing. In other words, difficulties sometimes come to challenge our selfishness so that we broaden our focus. Learn this. Philosophy desires the same as your nature. As for you, did you desire something contrary to this? Does pleasure bewilder you with its allure? Check if it doesn't. They also possess the greatness of soul, freedom, simplicity, goodness, and holiness. Isn't that interesting? Philosophy desires the same as your human nature. Desires. Human nature demands that you be human in the fullest sense of the term. May you open your toolbox of latent powers, bringing to Iona the most human aspects that lie dormant within you. Human nature asks for this, and philosophy works towards it. Sometimes, along the way, there are your poorly formed tastes. It's what we call the formation of character, enjoying what makes us grow. Reject what drags us into brutality. Sometimes this wasn't done very well, and along the way, there's a comfort, a preference that stands between this human nature and your action, your deed, your life. Philosophy works to awaken this voice of human nature within you. Imagine something like this, 3 concentric circles. Inside, you have the being, your essence, your human nature. On the outside, in the second circle, you have the appearance, which is this pile of masks we wear in the world. Social conditioning, family, the place where we are, the world we live in, the family we belong to, the education we receive, a bunch of conditions that created a mask, which is the appearance, that sometimes has nothing to do with the being. And then there's a third circle that you place on the outside, which is the desire to be. Do you know what that means? It's the philosophical circle. It's when you look at those men who earned the title of humanity, who were the most worthy, who had the most honorable actions, and you say, I will mirror that and strive to act like that. This desire to be, you might think, is a falsehood. I'm being hypocritical, but it is much more legitimate than the mask. It is much more legitimate than the appearance because it is an external representation of the being that is inside. It has a direct communication with the being that is inside. In other words, it expresses the human nature that is dormant and hidden behind the mask. In other words, it is much more you than the deformities of a social mask. And that's what Marcus Aurelius was saying here. Let us console ourselves with the hope of the natural dissolution of the body, confident in these two thoughts. First, that nothing will happen to me that is not in accordance with the nature of the whole. Second, that it depends only on me to do nothing against my God and my spirit, since, by offending them, no one can force me. Notice what he is talking about here. He speaks of death. Death was not a human invention. It is not a cultural invention. Death is part of life. It is part of the laws of the whole. What the Indians would say is part of the Dharma. So, if you notice the part. From this play you watched, the scene you saw is perfect, very well rehearsed. The actors are marvelous. We can imagine that probably the other scenes must maintain the same quality. We know some scenes of life and see the quality and care with which the laws of nature work. The quality and care with which things are cast on, perfectly crafted, how beautiful they are, how harmonious, that which we don't. Do you understand? There is a good chance that it follows the same rule. It's the same director who directs the entire show. Therefore, it is likely that nothing will happen that contradicts the harmony that the whole has imprinted on life when death arrives. Secondly, he says, instead of tormenting ourselves. So that's why it's part of the law that there is nothing else but to accept and flow with the greatest dignity possible. Instead of that, it is important to concern ourselves with what pertains to us, which is not to dishonor the divine outside of us and within us. The genius. What in Rome was called the male genius, or the Juno, female, which was your essence, your being. The divine within you. Enthusiasm, etymologically, comes precisely from this perception of the theos, in theos, of the divine, which resides within man. In other words, by recognizing this order, this harmony, this journey towards the good, by becoming faithful and consistent with it, we have played our part in the play. The rest, we can trust, the director is good and the plot is interesting. It is likely that it is all more or less of the same order and quality. Here is what I am made of, form and matter. For neither will be annihilated into nothingness, for nothingness is not their origin. Each part of my being will transform into some part of the world, and so on continuously. See how interesting this reflection is. From a material standpoint, what am I? Matter and form. Do you see that the two things are different? The matter of my body, the organic matter of my body, combined with the form of a human body. If I say a glass to you, for example, you'll ask what is made of glass? I say a glass. Ah, right, the form of a glass associated with the substance of glass. They are two different things. The glass could be made of plastic, it could be made of 1,000 other things. The human form with the organic substance that makes up the human body. Do you realize that there you have two eternities? The substance, to paraphrase and recall Lavoisier, is neither lost nor created, it transforms. These cells, these atoms that are here, the cells disassemble and will be reduced to atoms, which will be part of 1,000 other things in the universe. This substance within us, these atoms, who knows from how many other bodies they have come. You can't just take a Manuel Bandera of matter and make it disappear. Where would it go? It simply breaks down into its units, going on to compose something else, meaning the substance is eternal. And what about the form? If I ask you to destroy a triangle, can you do that? A triangle is an idea. It disappears here, appears around the corner, and shows up somewhere else. The triangle is an idea, it belongs to the realm of ideas. It cannot be destroyed, meaning there is eternity there as well. The form is eternal, The substance is eternal, meaning everything that materially composes us is eternal. And what composes us metaphysically, which is the being, why would only it not be eternal? Do you realize that this is incoherent? If the appearance is eternal, much more so will the being be. So, it's likely that we are the accidental marriage of three eternities, and this union is made so that consciousness can grasp something of the world. And at a certain moment, it retreats to the being, and the matter takes its course. That's quite interesting. We say, I died, because we identify with a fleeting accident, a marriage of a bit of organic matter with a form X. A marriage very prone to divorce. When this form and this substance separate, consciousness falls into the void. If it identified with the being, it probably wouldn't fall. The so-called myth, in quotes, of continuous consciousness, which so many Eastern philosophies talk about, is it really just an illusion, just a utopia? Who knows? Your soul aligns with your habitual thoughts. Ideas color the soul, thus tinting it through the meditation of thoughts like this. Anywhere you can live well. Each being was created for its own path, for its own purpose. So, where each one's goal lies, there is what is useful and good for them. One of the elements that most provoke bitterness and make us tint our soul with dark colors is thinking that I should be somewhere else, doing something other than here and now. In other words, nature is chaotic and doesn't know what's best for me. I know, if I could choose, I wouldn't be here. If you consider that nature is not chaotic, that it is endowed with a purpose, and that the point where it has placed you is the point of least resistance for your evolution and for your service as a whole, you realize that nowhere else in the world could you be more useful to yourself and to the world than in this place. Well, you are. Because if life is cosmos, there is a reason for you to be here. And if, at a certain point, this experience is no longer necessary, surely other paths will open up. But at this moment, here. If you can live well. And if this is where I am meant to be, this is where I must make my contribution to the world. And this is where the path of least resistance for growth lies. Trusting in life is one of the pillars of Stoicism. A guided life, folks. A life that has an axis. You know where you are, you know where you want to go. And it's not something where you have many options. You have to reach the human condition. The path you will tread can vary greatly, but the human condition is always the pinnacle of the pyramid. You can climb any face of the pyramid, but the peak is the same. We came here to complete ourselves as human beings, to reach the fullness of the human condition. And this life guidance helps us know what is a priority, what is important, and even better, how to make decisions. Today, there's a whole discussion process around this, about how the modern man is indecisive, how the modern man sometimes gets flustered by the small decisions of daily life. I tell you, with all honesty, if there isn't a sense of life that justifies all of life, I wouldn't even know what to decide. What to decide for what? To arrive where? It's the old story, which I often tell in my lectures, about the architect and the master builder. The architect designs the house plan, and the master builder, when he arrives to work today, he looks to the future, he looks in the direction he wants to go, to know what to do. Today, how am I going to choose what to do today if I don't want to get anywhere? Should I start digging the foundations for a building? Or for an earth house? Facing the sunrise or the sunset, I don't know where I want to go. I don't have a sense of mission. I don't know what my sense of life is as a human being. How do I choose what is right for me these days? Honestly, I think it's very worthwhile to seek tools to help humans overcome this indecision. But if there isn't a sense of life that justifies life as a whole, framing the present moment and freeing ourselves from the torture of decision-making seems very difficult to me. Think about that. Guidance, finding one's direction in life, is one of the fundamental concerns of the school, the two SIS. Nothing happens to anyone that nature doesn't give them the strength to endure. Know that the same setbacks happen to others who, out of ignorance or showiness, present themselves as dignified and unflappable. That ignorance and vanity are more effective than wisdom is regrettable. I think that's brilliant on his part. What a beautiful and interesting thing. There are no trials. Trials are not greater than men. They can't be. It doesn't make sense. You say, this challenge is bigger than me, this difficulty is greater than I am. If there were a difficulty greater than you, it wouldn't catch you. It's like a ball that I throw. It was too high for you. If it was too high for you, it doesn't catch you. It doesn't reach you. If it reached you, it's because it's your size. Understand, this is a matter of logic. The things that affect us do so because they are within our authority. They are our size, therefore, it is implied that we have the capacity to overcome them. Then we seek a whole process of reflection, self-knowledge, and an appropriate response to life. And when a challenge comes, sometimes a vain, proud, or ambitious person responds better than we do, out of self-interest, to maintain appearances, to uphold a certain social status. What kind of wisdom is this that is inferior to ignorance in providing answers to life? Realize that this doesn't make sense. And there lies the great distinction. When do we merely have information, and when do we have formation? By the responses we are capable of giving to life. That's where knowledge transforms into seeking wisdom. That's when you realize who knows and who doesn't. Who accumulates information and who digests, experiences, and integrates it within themselves. Who integrated knowledge into life. That is what we call wisdom. It's unusual. That ignorance can prevail over wisdom in the theater of life. Because we are all in the theater of life. And we must know how to reach the other side in the best way possible. And wisdom must be a qualifier, otherwise it is not wisdom. Learn to honor what is most powerful in the world. The being that serves everything and commands all. Likewise, honor what is most powerful within you. A being of a nature similar to that one. For it is what within you commands everything else and governs your life. Notice how many maxims exist that talk about this. I really like the Kybalion in the Egyptian, which says, in the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. Plato speaks of the macrocosm and the microcosm. Biblical tradition says, God made man in his image and likeness. Do you know what that means? There is a being in the universe that commands appearance, which is the manifestation. There is a being within you that commands appearance, which is your manifestation in the world. The equivalent image and likeness. And in recognizing this, we feel within ourselves, as parts, the image and likeness of the whole, the ability that the whole has to impose its laws on manifestation. And we to impose. Our laws of human essence, of deep and intimate human nature, go beyond mere survival. That's where you begin to live, moving from the Minotaur, where the animal dominates the human, to the Centaur, where the human dominates the animal. This interface with the world, with the survival we have and is necessary, which are the instincts, they are not bad. But they were not made to dominate the life of a human being. The human being has principles. Principles that are meant to hold the rules of your life in your hands. And thus, he is truly characterized as a human being. Returning to the biblical proverb, by your works, I will know you, and not by your packaging or mere external form. Almost nothing is stable. Always near is the unfathomable infinity of the past and the future, where everything fades away. As if it were going to last a long time. Amidst all this, isn't it foolish for someone to be proud, to grieve, to lament? Notice how much Marcus Aurelius insists on this, on the fleeting nature of life. How much we suffer for things that, since the world is the world, since we arrived on this stage, we know would never be ours. They would be fleeting, like passing fancies, and we cling to them and suffer. We suffer from the loss of this, from the loss of something that was never truly ours. The law of the universe is perpetual motion, it is change, it is transformation. The law of matter, but there is something within us that is above the law of matter, which is that which arrives and remains. So, let's say I decided to take a trip to a remote place to be able to recharge. Well, how much the ticket cost, the hotel I booked, whether the room was comfortable or not, these are elements of concrete memory which will pass and pass quickly. In a few years, you won't even remember this anymore. But if in that remote place, in the middle of a forest, you woke up early and noticed the celebration the animals have. When the sun arrives, you noticed how nature joyfully receives the light, how nature joyfully embraces a new opportunity for life. It becomes part of it. Your consciousness uncovers a secret that there is nothing more marvelous than this arrival of light, how vital it is, how much it stimulates us, and light. For us, it is an ever-expanding awareness of how all of nature recognizes a day as an opportunity, how each new day is a celebration. This perception will stay with you. This, nothing and no one can take away from you. And sometimes, the essence of experiences, we don't concern ourselves with it, but only with the packaging. We don't extract the fruit of life. I once wrote a text called The Orange Juice of a Philosopher. Where I talked about this, you take in the juice and throw away the peels. We drag this heavy bag of peels and don't drink the juice. We don't extract the sap of life, that which can awaken us, that which can make our consciousness more attentive, more present. Up until today, how have you conducted yourself with the gods, with your parents, your siblings, your wife? God, your children, your teachers, your mentors, your friends, those close to you, your servants. Reflect on whether your conduct towards them so far aligns with the principle of doing no harm to anyone. Speak ill. Notice how this resonates with that quote from Cicero that I love so much and keep repeating. Make sure to be a factor of addition for the people whose lives you are a part of. In other words, everyone who is interacting with me, am I going to be a factor of addition or subtraction? Will people become a little better for being with me? Have I been adding to them or have I been taking from them? Energy, life, lowering their consciousness. Because from these accumulated moments, one day will consist of the summary of your life. I was a value adder, I was. The one who subtracts value. Always question. This is one of the fundamental elements in life. Think beyond my personal interests. Go beyond the prison of selfishness. The people around me, how have I been with them? How can coarse and ignorant souls disturb a prepared and wise soul? Which soul is prepared and wise? The one that knows the beginning and the end, the reason spread across all beings, which, throughout eternity, governs the whole through regular revolutions. Do you already know who the prepared and wise soul is? The one who understands the Dharma of the Hindus. The one who understands that the universe is ordered, directed, has a purpose, has an end goal, and aligns with it. The one that is not going against the grain of nature, neither external nor internal, as both are equally important. Today we talk so much about respecting nature, and that's good, but we should include human nature in that. To know it and respect it in its most legitimate condition. Perhaps things would be quite different if we took this care. The man who is oriented within a universe endowed with meaning, he calls this a prepared and wise person. This necessarily knows how to resist, does not let themselves be affected by those around them. How can an ignorant and coarse soul come to harm a soul of this kind? It shouldn't. Perhaps it is not mature and prepared, and not yet worthy of being called wise. It is possible to always lead a happy life, as long as you can follow the straight path, as long as you can think and act with the method. Two things are common to the soul of God and man: not to let oneself be disturbed or hindered by anyone. Desire nothing more and know that goodness resides in just intention and activity. To know that what is yours and that nothing and no one can take away from you is righteousness. The soul of God and the soul of man have this ability to be satisfied by being what they are, integral souls worthy of their mission. And nothing external can disturb him. There is a very old saying, which I recall from a reading many years ago by Carlos Castanheira, that goes like this: the warrior can be wounded, but never offended. If someone harms you physically, affecting your health, sometimes it's unavoidable, but if someone offends you, that is perfectly avoidable. From the moment you understand the nature of the world and expect from people only what they can give you, don't create false expectations. Understand the cycles, understand the revolutions of consciousness, the seasons of consciousness, and do not expect from beings more than what they can be at each moment. Do not be surprised, and if you are not surprised, you will not be offended. External evils, most of the time, can be dealt with. But offense, sometimes, plants such deep roots of bitterness in a person that it is much more difficult to heal. And the man who possesses some wisdom can be wounded, but not offended. Happy is the man who gives himself a good destiny. It is with good dispositions, good inclinations, good actions, that one creates a good destiny. See, this definition of happiness is interesting. Good dispositions, good inclinations, good actions. I wasn't understood. Well, patience for those who didn't understand, but I did what was my responsibility. I wasn't well accepted. Well, at some point, perhaps, perhaps never, how many well-intentioned men were ignored by their contemporaries? We've already talked about this. There is a statistic related to this. Brilliant people, people of value, sometimes geniuses who produced great works, on average, 70% of them were not recognized by their contemporaries. And yet, their value was not diminished in the slightest. And yet, their peace of mind was not diminished in the slightest. They did what was their duty as human beings. And that is what's necessary for happiness. Marcus Aurelius is saying this. I've never experienced it. Why not give him some credit? A man who lived so well. If we always give credit to people who do things well. Fixes a car well, I hire them to fix mine. Knows how to build a house well, I hire them to build mine. Someone who knew how to live very well, could he not be useful to help me build my own life? Can't I learn from him? And then we move on to the 6th book. Starting with paragraph 3. Look into the essence of things, not their superficial quality or value. Don't deceive yourself. How fantastic it is, this ability of a person. When I gave the lecture on Gandhi, I was very impressed by the things he said. Sometimes other philosophers, other men from history, evoked the same admiration in me. There was a buzz around them saying X. They would take all that, process it, chew it over, sift through it, and when they opened their mouths to speak, Y. They were able to delve into the depths of people and understand. This person has this inclination because they have, and such a tendency to gravitate around these external motivations. One day it will run out, but for her, right now, it's true. Absolutely, I won't hurt her, but I won't agree with it. They are able to see and respect the inner self of each person, but also respect their own inner self. Also, and process everything that is given to it, just like the body digests everything it receives, assimilating what is good and eliminating the rest. This identity processes the information that comes from the environment, but it's your conscience that makes the final decision, guided by your values. And build your life in this way. Now, how can we delve into the essence of things if we haven't first delved into our own? If there is no inner life, depth, a measure of self-awareness, if we are superficial about ourselves, how can we have the ability to delve into the depths of another? Within the information that they give you, within the core of trendy ideas, within the heart of polarizations and ideologies. Dive into all of it and acknowledge that there are good things here and there. In everything, there are good things. I will build upon all of this, my own vision, which is not a product of external influences, but a result of my own discernment. See how this was already present in that historical moment, as Marcus Aurelius addresses it. Here is the best way to get revenge on someone: do not become like them. Interesting, isn't it? If someone is rude to me, I am rude to them. What is he doing? An ode to rudeness. And when I respond at the same level, what am I doing? An ode to rudeness. I don't fight it, I reinforce it. So, if I'm treated with rudeness, I become more diplomatic, more humane, with a greater ability to use words intelligently. I truly combat not the person, but the behavior that enslaves them. And, through my example, perhaps they can even recycle and overcome it. So, I wouldn't say it's the best way to get revenge on someone. I would say it's the only way. Because it's not about getting revenge on someone, but on that brutal and coarse behavior that currently enslaves that person, and even give that person a chance to free themselves. It's the only form of true revenge. If we can even call it revenge. If, in some way, the pressure of external things has disturbed you, quickly return to yourself. Don't fall out of rhythm unless forced to. The less you abandon the cadence, the better you will master it. In other words, if something steals you away from yourself, you realize, well, today I was not myself. There was something there that stole me from myself. Try to stay aware of this element, because at some point you will have to face it and resist. And don't let it steal you from yourself. Don't let yourself betray yourself. Work with these difficulties as a pedagogical tool. As the samurais used to say, the gap in consciousness is where the sword's edge cuts. Therefore, the edge of the sword showed me that here I have a gap in consciousness. I will work on this, because at some point I will pass through the edge of the sword, and it will no longer penetrate because the issue is mine. And maybe at the moment when there is no longer any gap for the sword's edge to penetrate, the sword will no longer appear. As it says in The Art of War, the best warrior does not fight. He doesn't even engage in battle. He is so seamless, with no gaps for the enemy to penetrate, that the enemy simply doesn't appear. There is no attraction by affinity between the victim and the oppressor. I am no longer the victim, nor am I the oppressor. Therefore, this relationship fell apart. The less you abandon this cadence, in other words, the rhythm. Remember that I used to say, there's a lecture about willpower where I explain this very well. It's willpower at our level, it's decision-making on the mental plane, and perseverance and consistency on the physical plane. In other words, rhythm on the physical plane. If our heart, our lungs, our intestines work, that is, all life is maintained on a rhythm. And, from a metaphysical point of view, it should be as well. It should be, in the same way, a rhythm. Well, if something made you break the rhythm, it will take some time, but you will recover, as long as you don't let anyone attack your decision. Undermine your principles. If you don't let your decision be affected, the rhythm will recover. Each time, you learn to become more impregnable. Very little will penetrate this rhythm of yours. Very little will be able to take you off your path. You are learning from the difficulties. The course of the elements is upward, downward, in a circle. However, virtue does not move in any of these directions, but in the divine direction. It advances through paths of difficult perception, but it reaches its goal. The beings of nature fall, roll to the sides, go in all directions, make circles, but human consciousness has a very clear, well-defined path. From the point of ignorance and obscurity where it is, to a point of full light as a human being. Human consciousness is here to banish the darkness of ignorance from itself and reach wisdom. There are no twists or turns. On this path, it is inexorable. And from this journey, you can measure whether your time is being real or if it's an illusory time. Because real time is measured by advances towards wisdom, advances towards the fullness of the human condition. There hasn't been any progress. I am living like a stone with whatever element it may be. I'm going backward, forward, to one side, to the other, spinning, but I haven't advanced towards the light. There hasn't been real time for me, not human time. I haven't moved from my spot. If something is difficult for you, do not assume it impossible for man. But being possible and natural for man, consider that it is also accessible to you. That's so Platonic, isn't it? That idea of having a personal hero. And to think that if there is a human being who is capable, it is a sign that this possibility exists within human nature. That's why this hero must always inhabit our imagination. When we want to cool down, when we want to give up, we look at him and realize that it's possible. Someone has already gone. Someone is already on the other side of the path. Therefore, if I search, I will find the way. Because, decidedly, it exists within human nature. A human being who has gone nourishes the hopes of all humanity. A human being who has reached a degree of wisdom casts a light and brings hope to the path of all humanity. One went, it is possible. As the Eastern tradition says, at the end of that classic, the Bhagavad Gita, the inner struggle of Arjuna, which represents man fighting against his own flaws. If one day you hesitate, look to the horizon, and you will see Arjuna, the prince, standing atop a mountain of corpses. A mountain of the corpses of his own flaws, his own weaknesses, his own ignorance. A man has triumphed. Remember? Look at the horizon, he's there. Therefore, do not give up. This possibility exists within you. If someone convinces me, proves that I think or act wrongly, I will strive to correct myself as I seek the truth, which has never harmed anyone. But those who persist in error and ignorance harm themselves. That's so beautiful. Well, do I have any truth? None. I seek the truth, and at this moment I have the best approximations I've managed to achieve. Someone comes and offers me a possibility to find something better. I listen. Someone offers me a fair and honest path, one that moves in the same direction, that has advanced a little further. But if I don't listen, I'm no longer a seeker of truth, am a sectarian, am dogmatic. I don't want to see, so I don't have to change my mind. Because, in my case, there is much less philosophy than passion. Passion for a path that, even if wrong, I have chosen as my own. And I dare not think of other possibilities. Be careful, because this kind of passion breeds dogmatism in all areas of human activity. We often associate this with religion. No, this exists in politics, in personal stances, in life, in society, in coexistence. In every corner, this possibility exists. Of a dogmatism that clings to something, even though I realize it is riddled with errors. That is not philosophical. Now, a philosopher is always open to revisiting their positions if someone is much a lover of truth as they are shows them a step further. But don't try to convince a philosopher by shouting through dogmatic positions and passion. Look, many of them throughout history have died, but they didn't give up on this path. Don't try to shout at Socrates on his way to the hemlock. Not even Giordano Bruno on the path to the stake. Don't try to dogmatize them. You don't treat a philosopher like that. And philosophy exists within each of us. And there is only one discourse capable of convincing philosophy. I seek the truth dispassionately. I seek with the spirit of a learner, just as you do. And take one step further than you. Look what I found. That indeed, no matter who it is, whether from the other side of time or the other side of the world, is worthy of being heard. Because if this is legitimate and true, and I ignore it, I have lost my philosophical standing. But, through reflection, the sincere pursuit of truth, not with passions. Don't work this way as a philosopher. It's a huge waste of time, and history is there to prove it. In the same life where the body never tires, it is shameful for your soul to grow weary. As much as we sometimes feel overwhelmed by sadness, by discouragement, if someone confronts you, do you want to die? No, the body wants to live. The body wants to keep on living. If the body doesn't give up, how dishonorable it is for the human soul to give up. And I speak of the soul still in the theological sense, but in the sense of anima, that which animates us, that which motivates us, the highest point of our consciousness, the most luminous. Why would it be discouraged? If it is becoming discouraged, it's because probably you haven't shed enough light on it, you're not worrying about it, you're not sufficiently nurturing that human consciousness of yours. And therefore, when poorly nourished, it allows itself to be discouraged. There is no logic in the human consciousness being more fragile than the body, more fragile in the face of adversity than the body, unless it is poorly nourished by what feeds it, by what is inherent to it. Values, a sense of human life. This 30, folks, which is the next paragraph, is a recipe for human happiness. I think this chapter is just perfect. I find it very beautiful. This has been around. You know about my habit of writing phrases on cardboard, on closet doors. This one was on my closet door for quite some time. And he was an excellent companion. Every morning. Look how beautiful the paragraph is. Keep yourself simple, good. Pure, worthy, an enemy of opulence, a friend of justice, pious, benevolent, tender, steadfast in fulfilling your duties. Strive to be as philosophy intended you to be. Adore the gods and protect mankind. Life is short. From earthly existence, the only true fruits are a virtuous disposition and actions that benefit society. In other words, how much I have worked on myself, how much I have refined, sculpted, and polished this stone of human nature. And, in the meantime, it enlightened the people around me. All the virtues, necessary attitudes. Strive to be as turquoise, as philosophy intended. You know what's wonderful? A recipe for life. Or, in other words, don't be shaken by anything that doesn't take that away from you. Well, I hesitated towards that human attitude that this moment demanded of me. Well, this is something to stop and reflect on. Apart from what comes from circumstances, well, circumstances will always be like that. Sometimes long cycles of adversity. Sometimes others bring times of prosperity, luck, or misfortune. Things happen around us, it rains, the sun shines. But the response I gave to life, if it wasn't human, well, that's it. I will lean on it and try to resolve it. That's my concern, that's my focus. While I am there, faithful to this, I am protected by heaven and earth. I honor my life, therefore, there's no reason not to be happy. Being true to oneself. Remember that. Being true to oneself. Just as night follows day, don't be false with others. Does anyone remember this passage? Shakespeare, Hamlet, Polonius' advice to Laertes, his son. Being true to oneself, just as night follows day, do not be false to others. Let us be simple, a simple piece of advice on staying true to the truth in search of a human sense of life. And that's enough, and you will be happy with that. Very, very beautiful. Isn't it strange that the architect and the doctor respect the norms of their craft more, in particular, than a man respects the rules that you share with the gods? Isn't that strange? So, you can't build a house where the ceiling height isn't just right, or lacks something in its structure. I don't know. I don't understand anything about architecture. Because you know, the house collapses, these must be respected, they are inexorable laws. And when we move to a much larger scope, which is life, we don't perceive these laws and we aren't loyal to them. How can we be more responsible with a small craft than we are with the great laws of life? Knowing that the house collapses too and keeps falling on our heads. And we rebuild another in the same way, with the same planning errors, the same calculation mistakes. In other words, it's inconsistent for us to be faithful to laws in one area and not in another. Either we don't perceive these laws, or we think the universe has no laws, or we believe life is a game of dice. That is ignorance. From the moment we shed light, we gain a little bit of wisdom. We realize that we live in an ordered universe and that there are laws. And to triumph within these laws, it's necessary to understand them and align with them. To reach the other side victorious, it's essential to learn the rules of the game. Notice this lack of coherence that exists in our lives. Very well pointed out by Marcus Aurelius. Cast on to the things that luck brings you. Love, but with true love. The people you have to live with. It's interesting, isn't it? Love with true love, those whom you are meant to live with. That's really funny. Oh, I love them so much. Who? The Japanese. All right, the Japanese are here, great, but the Japanese who are over there in Japan. My love doesn't have the reach to get there. I love the Japanese, but I don't love my next-door neighbor. I love humanity, but I can't stand the person who lives in the house with me. Be careful. Understand that the people around us have been brought together by the need for mutual experience. The one who is by my side has much to teach me, and I to them. So why not love them? If we didn't choose this path ourselves, we were placed in each other's lives to cooperate with growth. One another. Of course, one day our universe will expand to the point where our existence might resonate across the entire planet. But if it doesn't reach that point, in this circle where it resonates, love the people you are meant to meet and interact with on the stage of your life, no matter how big or small it is. Listen to men whose life resonated across the entire planet. We may not be that grand, but on the stage that is given to me, I will be a good actor. I will add to the storyline of the play. I will benefit all those who are on this stage. If we judge well or poorly the things that depend solely on us, we will have no reason to blame God or to be hostile towards others. That's why, if you stop to notice, most of the hostilities, most of the complaints, the grievances, we have a very significant share of responsibility in everything we demand from others. And in taking hold of this, don't think you'll become embittered by the mistakes you've made. No, you will have a point that allows you to lean on to propel yourself towards a more perfect future. When we outsource all the responsibilities of life, we might feel momentarily comfortable, but we don't grow. Because if it's the other person who made the mistake, it's them who need to grow, not me. And it's never like that. Normally, all of life is a blend of one and the other, as Plato used to say. In everything we accuse others of, if we analyze thoroughly and carefully, without passionate biases, we will see that a large portion of the fault is ours. Based on this realization, we can grow. This is the idea of Stoic responsibility. Even those who sleep, says, if I'm not mistaken, Heraclitus, work and contribute to what happens in the world. One contributes in one way, another in a different way, and sometimes without even realizing it. Even the one who criticizes everything, who tries to swim against the tide and destroy what exists, contributes, considering that the world needed a person with those characteristics. What remains is for you to know what position you place yourself in. Because the one who governs everything, in any case, will make use of you as it sees fit, and will give you a place among its cooperators and collaborators. Do you see? A person needs to grow. One of the elements she needs to develop is patience. This is the moment, she needs to become more patient. It's very likely that an annoying person will enter her life, but an incredibly annoying one. In a certain way, this annoying person also contributes to the scheme of nature, which helps that human being to grow. Whether we like it or not, in a conscious and enlightened way, or in an unconscious and obscure manner, in the end, everything comes together and fosters the growth of one another. Now, it's good for you to consciously choose what role you want to play in this drama. Do you want to be the stone? Or do you want to be the one who walks? Do you want to be the breeze that refreshes the face of the one who walks? or that violent rain that stands in your way, or that frost? What role do you want to play in the human drama? Is it to be a factor of addition or subtraction? That, in both cases, will end up being useful. But look, at a certain point, the pyramids will have to be destroyed. Time passes. In another moment, other civilizations will come, which may have to occupy that space in a different way. We know that this is part of the law of life, nothing material lasts. But look, there have always been and there will always be destroyers and builders of pyramids. Which group do you want to belong to? One day, vandals will come who will bring it all down, as they have tried over the past centuries. One day, those who succeed will come. And, in some way, even this vandalism contributes to a need for cleansing and renewal. But do you want to be a builder or a destroyer of pyramids? Choose how you want to contribute to this grand play, which is life. What role do you want to play? Do you want to be the stone? Do you want to be the breeze? Do you want to be the builder or the vandal? It's really unfortunate that we have to contribute through our flaws. It's really unfortunate that we have to contribute by being the stone, being the obstacle. The more conscious we are, the more active and positive our role becomes in this play. My city, my homeland, like Marcus Aurelius, is Rome. As with man, so with the world. The things useful to these two homelands will be, for me, the only goods, as a natural consequence. One day, perhaps more than Rome, more than the world, perhaps the Dharma, perhaps the law of the universe, perhaps, as I mentioned just a moment ago, the dreams of God will be our goal. And let us feel consciously integrated into this great objective. At this moment, the tendency is to contribute to ever greater goals, to contribute to more people than just myself, to think about benefiting more than just my own skin, to include in my dreams the benefit of as many human beings as possible, to expand, to broaden horizons, because that is the trend. If you walk towards this, you are climbing the pyramid. If you distance yourself and become increasingly selfish, it's a geometric issue. Those who distance themselves from others in their dreams are descending. The pyramid is not rising, and when you rise, you narrow your focus. When you descend, you distance yourself. Against facts, there are no arguments. One day, perhaps our dreams will be the dreams of God. One day, perhaps, we will be citizens of the Dharma, aware. But at this moment, at least, a step less selfish than I was yesterday. This is fundamental. Once we move towards unity, we must each day become a little more in its image and likeness. Is everything that happens to each of us useful to the whole? That would be enough. Looking even closer, you will see that everything useful to man is, in the same way, also useful to the whole. In other words, what is useful is not necessarily pleasant. Always notice this difference. What is useful is what makes you grow as a human being. The pleasant, in our distorted taste, is sometimes what makes us more animalistic. Why does a man have a violent, vulgar attitude? Why does that seem pleasant to him? That is a distorted taste, a deformed character. Therefore, the useful and the pleasant, when we are not well educated, when we are immersed in ignorance, are very different. What is truly useful to a person is what makes them more human. And this doesn't necessarily work just for him, it works for the whole. Why? Because there is harmony, because there is flow, because everything moves towards unity. When seeking joy, consider the merits of those who live with you. Admire the work of one, the modesty of another, the generosity of a third, the various qualities of others. Certainly, nothing is more pleasing than the image of virtues shining in the customs of those who live with us. Especially, when they become numerous, always present, keep them with you. Let's think back to the first chapter, where he thanks a bunch of people. He thanks a man named Rusticus and lists a lot of qualities in him. And, further on, he confesses to us that one of the greatest difficulties he had was dealing with Rusticus. In other words, at a certain point, he turned the tables and learned to see Rusticus' qualities, and the world that was once dark became entirely luminous. Seek the qualities in the people around us, which certainly exist, as everyone is dual, including ourselves. There's a talk of mine where I share some stories, tales from all over, and one of them, if you'll allow me, fits perfectly here. It was about a man who heard about a celestial, perfect city and decided he would leave his own city because he couldn't stand living there anymore, and he would go there. Someone told him to walk in a certain direction, and he would get there. This perfect celestial city was very similar to his own city, except that there everything was perfect, without any flaws. And he immediately didn't even say goodbye to his family, his children, to anyone. He set out on the path to this city. He walked and walked and walked. Well, I must be getting closer after walking so much. He decided to stop and rest. And when he lay down, he placed his shoes, his sandals, slippers, in the direction he was walking, so he wouldn't get lost the next day. But when he falls asleep, a man passes by, a prankster, and he turns his shoes in the direction from which he had come. Upon waking up in the morning, he automatically gets up, puts on his sandals, and starts walking in the direction of the city he had come from. As he walks a bit further, he looks at the horizon and sees what must be the celestial city. My friend did say it was similar to mine. He gets closer and enters the city, noticing how similar it is. The people are the same. Look how everyone is friendly. See how kind they are. I enter, pass through the market, and look, it really is similar, just the same. Except the merchants are all honest, smiling, attentive. What a beauty. And he goes to his house, knocks on the door. His wife answers, "Wow, it's fantastic. It's a house just like mine, but without any flaws. It's a wife just like mine, but look how she's smiling. Look at those wonderful children." He spends his whole life there, living in his city, believing it's the ideal city, and he is tremendously happy. Notice how Eastern cultures work to convey an idea symbolically, while the West speaks in a much more explicit way. But it's exactly the same idea, exactly the same philosophy. Place your happiness in the actions of another. The one who loves glory. The one who loves pleasure places it in their own sensations. The one who loves intelligence places their happiness in their own actions. Do you see how interesting that is? That man who needs glory, recognition, his happiness is in the hands of those who acknowledge him. If tomorrow or the day after they no longer recognize you, imagine having to check the IBOP survey every day to see how many people like you, just to decide if you'll be happy today. Obviously, this is unstable. The tides of human nature are going to be very variable. And your happiness is very uncertain. One day, you'll be completely forgotten. And then, where does your happiness go? The one who places it merely in sensations as well. These sensations start to fade as life progresses. At a certain age, the taste isn't the same, the vision isn't the same, the hearing isn't as sharp, he will also lose it. Now, the one who places it in their own actions, who can steal that happiness from them. If I was consistent with my human nature today, I sleep the sleep of the just. And my happiness is assured. Notice that it's a world of serenity, of autonomy, that Stoicism offers, which we desperately need today. Fervently in today's world. This autonomy is strongly committed to the world, but with a level of independence where your happiness is guaranteed by your own stance and actions in the world. It doesn't depend on anything external. And finally, what is not useful for the hive is not useful for the bee. What is not useful for the whole cannot be useful for the part. And this misconception will cause the part to become the destroyer of the whole. When a cell starts to think that what is good for it might not be good for the whole, that cell will kill the body. And a little of this psychological drama of not thinking about the whole, but only about oneself, is what destroys society, is what destroys relationships, is what destroys life as a whole, makes life as a whole unviable. Well, that's it for today. In our next lecture, chapters 7 and 8, we're making good progress. I hope you're keeping up with the reading. I greatly appreciate your presence. And now that the lecture concludes, the reflection on everything we've discussed begins. Wishing you a thoughtful reflection.